like to say that you can throw me against like every problem, but there's certainly stuff that I'm better at and stuff that I really suck at. So coming up with ideas and also concepts, and also if it's a game, also maybe implementing gameplay aspects into it, and thinking about this stuff and just shooting out ideas and sketches and variations and stuff. This is what I excel at. But if you have those constrained, like we really need this and you have to make this way, and then it doesn't satisfy me as much, and I'm not good at it.
How many gears do you have in your creative process? And how easy is it to switch between them? This is what we discuss in today's episode with the brilliant Till Freitag. Till is a concept designer specializing in vehicles and props with a unique twist. And in this episode, we get to understand Till's process and how he's been nurturing a very successful career whilst developing his own game. An amazing episode awaits. Let's go. Let's get going. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and I'm delighted to welcome on today's guest, the amazing Till Freitag. Welcome, Till.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you for jumping on. Super excited to speak to you. Big fan of your work. But before I jump into that and just ramble on about how awesome you are, I'll be grateful if you could let the guests know who you are.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm Till. I'm a concept designer for hard surface vehicles, sci-fi stuff, props, actually all kinds of stuff that doesn't involve characters and creatures. And I'm also doing like game design. So that's like my main thing, game development. But I guess we're here to talk about the design, the visual design part of things.
Definitely, but we can definitely venture off to anywhere, to be fair, because like again, like you said, that the first thing I remember noticing your work a few years ago, as you do with anything, ArtStation or social media, you see something that grabs your attention and you kind of like, okay, move on to the next thing. But then certain things kind of stick in your brain, and your designs are some of them. It's like one of those where, okay, I need to click this, I need to see who this is, what's going on here, because this is definitely striking. Let me just get the name of it, but the one that really first caught my attention thinking, whoa, this is fresh and different, was your space elevator repair piece. I think you did that a few years ago, and myself personally, very similar titles, not quality of work, but titles to yourself, like vehicles, props, all that kind of stuff. So that's tend to what I specialize in. So I definitely have like a bias towards these kind of things. But then checking out your work was like, okay, wow. Like, yeah, definitely that was the reaction, like, wow. Which is, I don't know how you feel about art at the moment, where there's a lot of samey things, but you've definitely managed to nail your own voice and a unique voice. I guess we can get into the heavy stuff right away. Like, is that something that's deliberate, your art style, or is it like it's just how it manifests for you?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So for me, it is always about creating something original, but I don't. I'm certainly trying to have something that's different, but it's also not like I'm trying hard for something different. But it might just come down to like the references I'm looking at, and also the way that I'm working. So my workflow, I mean, it's pretty standard. So like this stuff is of course just line work, and then with some colors into it. But yeah, maybe the references with like insects and more organic stuff make the difference. But yeah.
And is that like, I guess you mentioned the insects. Me personally, I'm not scared of them, but I don't like being around them. But visually, they are some of the most fascinating things in the universe. That and deep sea creatures. Is that like a fascination for yourself? Is that something you've been inspired by, or was it particularly for your project was like, hey, I like this kind of reference material, I'm going to go with that? Like, is there something deeper with your, I guess, with insects?
I just like the shape distribution and hierarchy and all the stuff, but it's not like sometimes I pick out a very specific reference of like an insect or an ant head or something, like one of those macro shots of an animal. And deep sea creatures you mentioned is also like super cool and super aerodynamic and whatever, like crazy shapes and always good hierarchy. Like most of them are like super sick, and that's also something that I think car design also plays a role to a certain degree, like those flowy forms and stuff. So I looked at too many cars, even though I'm not a car guy and I don't like cars. Like in the city, they stress me out. But I got a real hate growing for cars. But I like the design, and it's like there's so much energy put into car design, and so that's like one of the most pushed design branches, and I have like great respect for all the designers. And what was my point? Yeah, but I'm not for most of them. I don't pick out a specific reference. It's more like the stuff I'm looking at, and then it processes in my head, and then something comes out. But I also have to say that I don't like most of my personal projects are not like, okay, I got these constraints. That's something I want to design for. I'm just coming up with a shape, and then, okay, what could this be? So there are no constraints. So working with clients is obviously the other way around. And sometimes that also pushes me into more generic ideas like, okay, we need a vehicle now, and it has to carry like 6 people, and this is the terrain. And then going from it, from this angle, like from the proper angle, for me, at least, leads to more standard designs also. But yeah.
Interesting. So, like, I guess, which kind of makes sense, but your personal work is essentially just almost freestyle. Like, whatever comes, like, it's a natural process, right? It's organic.
Yeah.
Perfect. And you mentioned there with client work, like, I'd love to get the cars in a bit as well, because that's I'm in the same boat as yourself, but my reasons I think are different. I'd love to get into that. But like with, I guess, client work and your personal work, obviously, like you mentioned, they're two very different workflows. I say different in terms of, like, I guess, approach. Do you have a preference for each one, or is it just like kind of like, okay, I'm switching to this mode now? So mentioning cars, like you have different driving modes. It's like, okay, I need to do this now. This is how I collaborate myself, and I just go ahead. Or do you go for a different process to get yourself in the right gear? Another car pun. When you're tackling client projects.
So the clients I've worked with, so I did this for like 2 years now, roughly, and also not like full-time, super intense, because I've been on this game project, but I had the chance to work with a few different clients. I mean, you're obviously, you have probably a huge experience, like compared to what I have, like in client experience, but I've worked with different clients and at different stages. And for some of them, it's like, just do whatever. This is like, just do whatever. And this is like very early, and we just need ideas. And this is kind of the stage that I like most. And then there are projects where there's everything's defined. Like, I haven't worked for Star Wars, but just Star Wars would be one of those IPs. Like, you can't go too far, you can't push it too far, you can't introduce this stuff, like all the Imperial stuff needs to look like this. And so in this constraint kind of scenario, the workflow is different. Like and also, like, I'm not always using 2D and 3D, and my 3D approach is also very different. And it depends on if you get provided with like a huge kit bash library and material presets and all this stuff, and then you just make arrangements and variations of stuff, or or if you have to come up with everything on your own, and you start with like cubes in Blender, and that's the workflow shapes the product. And so I've had very different experiences, but
And do you have like a preference, or is it just a case of whatever is needed, this is what we're going to go with?
Yes. So I would like to say that you can throw me against like every problem, but there's certainly stuff that I'm better at and stuff that I really suck at. So coming up with ideas and also concepts, and also if it's a game, also maybe implementing gameplay aspects into it, and thinking about this stuff and just shooting out ideas and sketches and variations and stuff. This is what I excel at. But if you have those constrained, like we really need this and you have to make this way, and then it doesn't satisfy me as much, and I'm not good at it. And I'm also not good at working like extremely clean. So I have the greatest respect for people who come up with like great topology and great maps and materials and everything very efficient and great render times. And I'm just brute forcing my way through everything and cheesing. Like I got the cheesiest of workflows for everything. So yeah.
I don't know. I think if you see mine, yours might look way more sophisticated.
Okay, you have to show me.
I think we're definitely part of the brute force club. And yeah, I totally envy. I know what you mean when you say that. I totally envy those who are not brute force, like very like almost like ballet dancers, like very fine tuned. We're almost like just bouncing our way through. Wreck-It Ralph, if you've seen that film. And like that's interesting you mentioned there, like about certain things, and I guess it's natural because you find out what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. More so when you're exposed to it. Like it's hard to know what you're going to like versus what you're not going to like. Let's say it's a food, for example, before you even taste it. Obviously, other senses come into it, like smells and stuff. But yeah, let's not talk about food. But like for your own workflow, like was that something that occurred again whilst working on projects, or quite early on have you been very aware of your strengths? Or I guess maybe a better question is, when did you begin to recognize what your strengths were, or where you're most impactful as an artist and a designer?
Yeah, so I think that emerges from just making stuff, but I found myself sketching more and feeling like I feel like 100 sketchbooks laying around and you can't show them to anybody. It looks like it's like the biggest bullshit but it generates ideas, and I also like to iterate ideas. So and that's also something that I like recently tried to cultivate a little bit more, like just shooting out ideas and letting them rest for a while and then revisiting them and having a fresh look on it, or sending it to friends and getting their opinion on it. And just really like for personal stuff where there's no critical deadline or something, I can just have a bunch of stuff lying around for ages and I'll revisit it and iterate it. Yeah, but usually, like for me, it started out just filling sketchbooks. And then I got really into detail and into like rendering, and in 3D I tried to just model. I saw something that I liked and I tried to get there in some way, and then you discover, okay, I can use this tool and this. I've been lucky because I've always used Blender. I only know how to use Blender. I never had to learn Maya or some weird software. Like yeah. And Blender I did, yeah, and I'm not like very patient. So I'm, as I said, like it's I think I got great pace and great output, but it's not very clean, and it's more on the ideas and the the variations, like getting something to a certain shape. But when it comes to like rendering out the stuff out properly, it's kind of difficult, and I'm sitting like on the more cleaner pieces. Like the stuff I'm showing is generally not that rough, but then I'm like, once I've pushed the idea, iterated it sufficiently, then sit down for like 20 hours and with one pixel brush or something try to get it to a rendered stage, like at least for 2D. And for 3D it's a little bit more convenient, of course.
And for your personal stuff, I mean, am I right in assuming that everything that you've posted, at least on the ArtStation, is all personal projects? Is that correct?
Yes, it's all personal. Like one is a university project. It's my bachelor's degree, but yeah, I don't know if I have client work that I'm allowed to show.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, but yeah.
Sorry, and like, how long do they take you? Like looking at them all now, like I guess I'm sure they will vary, different projects, different needs, and so such. But do you feel like you have like a general kind of like rhythm where you kind of know how long it's roughly going to take, or is it very different for each one?
Yeah, so yeah, for client work, I obviously need to make an estimate, like how long does it take you, like how long, whatever you. So I know how to get to a certain degree of quality, and this degree is like yeah, it's not as clean as in my portfolio stuff, or at least like compared to the newer pieces, but it's like a sufficient quality level so they can give it to the modeling team or whatever, like the implementation team into the game or something. So, but yeah, for these projects, it's also very different. Like when it comes to, like for example, the space elevator, I now know the shape languages and I could make variations of this and make like a whatever out of it, like another spaceship or something. So that would be fairly quickly. And I also tend to just directly reuse parts of the images. And for 3D stuff, I got my Kitbash library that I'm feeding with every new project that's coming in. And I also like to reuse that stuff and just Boolean a lot of stuff out and apply my cheesy workflow to it. And in Blender, I'm just smudging it together with some smart materials, like with Fluent Materializer materials. So there's, yeah, it brings everything together with a little bit of Rust. But yeah, you don't see me making those super clean 3D models like industrial design stuff. So that would, I try to do it, and I also learned a little bit of Fusion, but this is something that I don't do in 3D because it's just, you need to be accurate and you need to think about stuff, and yeah.
Interesting. Do you think that will change? That do you see stuff maybe becoming, or at least branching out into that and developing that skill, or is that something that you like kind of like, nah, I'm happy with the path you're on right now?
Yeah, I would like to learn some of the stuff, but I don't want to use Fusion. So I'm waiting for basically, so there's this new program, I forgot the name, that is a good alternative for artists. I want to give this a shot, and there's also some sort of plugin for Blender coming up that looks very promising, and then I'll try to get some props maybe. I think for prop design it's pretty cool. For vehicles it's like the industrial, like this more manufactured style and this more believable, like those shapes that are more believable, and yeah, those are plates like welded together. That's not like super interesting for me personally, because it's something that I also see in real life, or maybe I don't see the good ways yet to implement it. But I'm generally not using like primitive shapes and like very flat surfaces. That's something that I, at least for my personal work, completely banned, but no, for no particular reason. I don't know. Yeah, I'm fascinated by people who can make like very geometric stuff work and get great detail distribution and great hierarchy into it. But for me, everything, I just tend to break up surfaces in like weird organic ways that are super complex. So I should actually learn ZBrush. I think that would be the best tool for me to learn, but I don't have the time at the moment to do so. But that's something that could be very powerful for me, I guess.
Sick. And I guess using your wishful thinking, what is like the perfect kind of software or maybe the tool that would give you exactly what you need?
Midjourney? No. I think, yeah, I think, I don't know. I think if I were more into ZBrush, it could be ZBrush, because that would give me a good way to get the shapes from my 2D concepts into 3D in a good way. So I don't like to do it in Blender. and coming up with a design in Blender. When I started design in Blender, it just turns out completely different. I tend to go into a completely different direction. Like for example, with with like this truck, the sand colored truck with the gun on it. Mm-hmm. It's like a completely Blender workflow, and it suddenly turned into it's still a little bit organic, but it's it has this Kit Bash feeling to it, like this. How do you call this? Not steampunk, but diesel punk.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah. It's got like that old kind of like, I guess, anime type look as well. Like there's a lot of that kind of visual language in some animes that I've seen.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I'm discovering so much stuff that is like super. Like I haven't really looked at Akira like I knew it for like a year or something, and now I'm like, what?
Oh really?
It's all of this awesome stuff. Yeah, I'm a total like I need to look at all of the classics.
Oh, for sure. Like I know only a few, and then for a project I had to like do a deep dive into some animes. And stuff I've never seen before, I wasn't even aware of, and it completely blew my mind. Like how awesome the designs were in there for the time that it was made. It blows anything that's out these days, and this was all done like traditionally. Obviously, as you're aware, like design doesn't matter, like the tools you use, but the level of execution, the understanding of form, and everything. It was just like, even now, just thinking about it, I'm just like, whoa, that's just like insane. Like
it influence your work as well, like
for sure.
To
the point where I would say even made me reevaluate my complete approach. Like you look at it and think, okay, like, because you tend to like, I don't know about yourself, but when you I guess I'm also like a kind of like a feels kind of guy as well. Like when I create, like I'm just like, whatever the vibe is, whatever I'm feeling, I'm just gonna run with that, as opposed to pick something, plan something, and then just execute it. Obviously, it depends on the project and the requirements and what have you. But sometimes you like go down these developmental paths or whatever, and then I guess you pick up habits when you're doing that, and then sometimes you kind of like they kind of stick a little bit, and then you realize that, oh, this is not good or not what I want now. And then you kind of switch, which is good because you still got those skills and you can switch to the new ones. But yeah, like it's weird because I love art, but I don't consume it heavily in the sense of like for inspiration or for design. But then when I see certain there are certain pieces of art or certain projects or certain artists where you just look at it and thinking, okay, like it's just hypnotizing almost. Then yeah, man, it's like it's interesting. And to switch that to yourself, are there any projects or artists even or designers that make you feel like that as well? Like you think, okay, that is a North Star, a benchmark, someone that's inspirational, or has just completely influenced you overall?
There's a huge list of like extremely good artists. The classics like how do you pronounce them in English?
I say Mobius. I'm sure it's different though.
Yeah, and then who else? Like Mike Mignola. I only recently discovered him, but everyone was always referencing Mike Mignola, and then I picked up this Hellboy companion and was like, I know why now. That's like extremely nice. The sci-fi classic guys, I always forget their names, but I think that everything else is like stacked on top of their work. It feels like, and they're like the very foundation, like Sid Mead, and from like more recent artists, I really like people who are like super creative and have a lot of variation, like Darren Bartlett, like with his Fight Punch, with his tribal world is like super inspirational. And also Sheng, I've also seen his podcast episode. I think his work is just extremely, I can't get my head around it. And workflow wise, for example, for 3D, it would be Alex Seneschal. And he also always gives me very nice feedback for my designs and points out what like wrong proportions or something, or like a bad silhouette and stuff. So he's also a great art director. Yeah, and his 3D stuff is just super, like, extremely cool. And then there are a lot of artists like on ArtStation that have like extreme skills, like execution skills that I can't get my head around. Like everyone who paints like splash arts or something, and there are like tons of Asian, Chinese artists who just have like the best skills of rendering stuff, and I'm like, how do you do this? I don't know. But that's more fun from an execution side, and yeah. I mean, there are a lot more people that I got their work.
Now, for sure, like I totally can relate. Like, when you put on the spot, you have like a million names, and then all of a sudden it narrows down, and you forget like 999,000 of them. But I totally get you, and it's good to see as well, because it shows there's so much inspiration, so much originality. I'd put you there as well, because your work definitely stands out, and sometimes standing out can just stand out for the sake of standing out. But I believe your work stands out for good reasons, because it's like when you're professional as well, like sometimes you look at things in that critical way as an artist, as a designer, and I want to say rarely, but sometimes you do forget to enjoy things just as a viewer. And I think with your work, at least for myself speaking, I can definitely enjoy it as a viewer. And then when I look at it in detail, there's definitely that little tinge of envy, thinking like, why can't I do these kind of things as well? But a lot of it is just admiration, and just like almost, I think it's the same for you, can tell by the way you're speaking about other artists, it's like a sense of celebration for something awesome that you see, because you just want to see awesome things, right? Like you want to see something cool, something well crafted, especially when it's, like made, and human made, you could say as well. So with that said, and we mentioned the word humans, I guess you think where I'm going to go with this.
Yeah.
Where do you think, like, how does AI fit into your creative viewpoint and world right now?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult topic. So, like, the big thing is, of course, that AI just is based on all the artists' work, and the most prolific artist gave the most, and the most prolific and best artist gave the most, feeded the engine the most, and it's for like something like Midjourney, easiest to recreate something of like Greg Rutkowski or something, and he developed this style, and he put so much work into it, and now some people are just like, now I can copy this, and you're nothing, and they like, it's absurd. I'm not totally blown away by something like Midjourney. I think it will eliminate some branches of. So I can see, like, from a game design perspective, imagine you want to create a card game or something, like a deck builder game, and you're making some sort of prototype or something, and you just need some pictures of like dragons and soldiers and maybe some houses and spells and something. And now you can just open Midjourney and create some of all of these placeholders, and some of them might be good enough to even take them into the game. And as a game developer, you're like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. On the other hand, of course, some studios are think then they can just put out all the or fire all the artists and be good with it, but like everyone needs a place to grow and to develop skills, and this is maybe something that will have some repercussions for the industry at some point, I'm thinking. But yeah, very close projects that are not connected to each other, like for illustrations or like high fantasy stuff, that it's so abundant in a very good style, like it can recreate this stuff. I'm not saying though that this should be legal or whatever, or should be good, and I think it's like it's a little bit like theft, and I feel sorry for everyone who developed a great style and a unique style that can now be copied and abused. On the other hand, it can give some great starting points, like as for inspiration. Like it comes up with weird organic mushroom structures that you couldn't imagine really. So that's, but it's also like you would find those pictures on Pinterest. So yeah, I'm not too sure. And when it comes to this new function, so I'm trying to keep like up to date just to know what is possible, like because it might have an impact on my work and on my jobs that I can secure or whatever. So and this anime style seems to me it seems very sameish, like it can create characters and props and guns and whatever, but they are very samey and feel very generic, but sometimes like they're executed on this very like technically very high level, but they don't bring in new ideas. And I haven't seen too much originality or new ideas in general from Midjourney. And it also sucks at vehicles in general, so I'm safe for now.
For now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. Obviously, you mentioned that you've been playing with it. I haven't touched it for quite a while now. But it was this time last year where it were kind of like started to blow up. Like I got access to the beta, and initially, and I think you can relate to this as well. But I'd love to get your input. Like from a creative point of view, from an ideation point of view, it had a place in a creative process because it would instigate, it would trigger ideas, it would trigger new, especially when you're looking at forms, for example, like it would come out with things that would take a while to find reference of, or maybe get to the conclusion of yourself, and then it's kind of already there, and then you can go wild with it, and then you choose how you want to choose it. But then it was, what I found disappointing was people just using that as the final thing. And I get why people would do it. And I guess I'm more looking at it from as a designer, as a creative, as opposed to just a consumer. It's like I remember being a kid and playing video games, and if I'm stuck, I'll find a cheat code to try and better the game, complete it, and then move on with my life. And I think a lot of consumers who use, at least I guess what I'm assuming is how they use AI image making is for that kind of same reason. I'm sure some have like, you know, like you mentioned, like for work or trying to build something, whatever kind of their projects may be, and they kind of bypass the art for it. That's a factor we have to deal with, I think, now, which is a shame. But one thing that really threw me off, and I guess it kind of taught me a lesson about being super naive with especially new technology that feels like it's too good to be true in terms of speed or come to solutions, and that's quite vague. But like, say for example, on Instagram or YouTube or any other social media, I think you can just put in any song on your post from any artist, and you don't have to pay them royalties. But that's because Instagram or Meta, whoever, has an arrangement with the license agencies, so when it's played they get paid, and it's all like a little mini ecosystem. Obviously the artists don't have control, but whoever owns their music rights or publishing rights, they have control, and it's like, I guess, a nice compromise to come to. So, and the same with like image rights, like you got was it Creative Commons? Like if you want to use it, if it's CCO, I think that's the one where you can use it and you're safe. Like no one's really going to sue you if it's copyrighted or not royalty free, or you need to like give credit or something, and you found out to use that without that permission, you're screwed almost, or you get a lawyer kind of thing. So based on that, how things used to be, and I say used to be pointedly, I thought, oh, well, if these are images, because you could clearly see, like if you mention something, it's scouring the internet or scouring something where they've got a reference point. Like there's no way at this point in time, I'm not obviously I'm not a coder or a mathematician or whatever, but there's no way you can make something so close to an actual artist's artwork unless it knows what it looks like. So I had assumed that either they're getting royalties or they've got a license for it, because I remember I looked into, I think it was Disco Diffusion or something like that, and it had the initial prompt of Greg Rutkowski, and I thought, okay, that's a bit odd. Maybe he's in partnership with them to make that. Like that's what he's doing, like offering his work to train the data or something. There's some maybe commercial arrangement there, but clearly not. And it was rife, and everyone was kind of like, well, it was stealing stuff, and that obviously as a professional will put me off. I would like to think if I wasn't an artist, it would still put me off, but I don't know. Because I have a different viewpoint, like, because it's not directly affecting me. But yeah, like, nevertheless, one of the things that really put me off was the fact that it's without permission, and this is putting it lightly, like taking artists and training stuff. That kind of disappointed me. But in terms of how you can quickly come up with ideas to help you in a project, I do like that aspect of it. So I'm interested to see how that aspect develops over time, because I'm sure, as with anything, that when people do want to consume it a lot, like say, look at the very first cell phones before they became smartphones. Looking at them now, they're very basic, and by today's standards, they're unusable. But back then, it was considered amazing. And because we are so reliant on them, the iterations of those and the variations throughout the years are getting more and more sophisticated and more aligned with what we want. Yeah. So if AI is going to continue like this, then I believe that maybe there will be a tool in the future where it's kind of like, at least legally you're safe, ethically, which is important for me. You're kind of good with that, but there's always a gray area with ethics in anything these days. But yeah, sorry for that little ramble.
No, yeah, so
like AI is just, it's here, I guess. But in terms of for yourself, because you mentioned there, which I think is a smart thing to do, like you're still keeping an eye on it just to see how it affects you, as opposed to kind of maybe, let's say, brushing it under the rug and thinking, if I don't think about it, it's not going to affect me. So where do you think it will change the industry, or what would you like it to do so it becomes maybe a tool for yourself, or maybe even not?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I think it's I wouldn't want to have it near me because like, for example, like I imagine putting in one of my images and maybe making variations of it, maybe some sort of creature, and I want to add some legs and some arms or something in this very specific style, or it analyzes a certain style and can put out variations from it. But everyone could do it, so my work would be obsolete at this point after giving like the initial artwork out, and then everyone would be hesitant to share something, or I don't know how. I think everything would just collapse. But I see it like from a game development perspective. I think it's cool to come up with placeholders for certain stuff very fast when there's a lot of 2D stuff in your game. But obviously, using it. I mean, you don't have to use an artist's name in the prompt or whatever, so it's not something you have to do, but it's definitely trained on artists. Mm-hmm. Like at some point, it benefited from all this hard work and this skill that has developed. So yeah, I'm not sure, but it's definitely also it's just a very interesting tool. I really like it. If there was such a tool for music, and I'm sure there is, I would play around with it, and would never come to my mind that some artists, like music artists, like it's a threat for them, or for some audio engineers or whatever. But just as a toy, as something to play around with, to have fun with, and see like weird SpongeBob as a whatever on the moon in a rocket. I don't know, like something crazy. It's also just a fun tool, I think, and it's super cool to see something emerge. Even though it might be very similar to just scrolling some Pinterest stuff and finding great references that are, in most cases, even better. Yeah, I think but the thing you mentioned, what also frustrates me, is when people just use like this mid-journey generation and claim to be a prompt engineer or something, and then directly upload it. And it's often, it might look good, and they maybe overpainted it a little bit, especially when it comes to characters or something, but I'm really sick of seeing this on like some sort of front page, just some generic character, like on art stations, like mostly female characters that trend on the front page for whatever reason. And it's totally, I don't want to see it. I'm just, we don't like it's like with sci-fi weapons. They're like, most sci-fi weapons have to be designed at this point, and someone has to have a library and just acid flip like a certain gun. And if they don't acid flip it, they asset flip it on accident because it has been created by someone else, and they maybe make it like in a so like in these very established sci-fi styles, like every single gun has to be it's already there at the moment, I guess. But and the same goes for like I don't know anime girls or whatever, like whatever's on ArtStation front page. Yeah,
I think like obviously people's relationship with things will change over time, but I agree. Like I think the shelf life of things that are made in that way are very, very short, if things aren't short enough as they are anyway. For things that people have, crafted their whole lives on things, people consume it very quickly and just move on. I think what you just explained there, that's the feeling that I have with a lot of stuff also. I think that's just going to get more and more like that. Like people are just going to consume it. Okay, it's discarded because it is almost worthless, at least in terms of the time and effort put into it. Like, although like I think in terms of like say in a creative sense, I think it is cool how you can paint with words, but not in this way.
Cool,
like, there's something super cool with that. Like and you can just get creative with words as you can with colors and values and what have you. But the way it's implemented right now, that's not that doesn't qualify how I would say you can paint with words, so to speak. You mentioned music there as well. I can see your drums in the background. Like you can
annoying my neighbors.
Like, you can say the same thing with sound as well. Like with sounds, you can evoke certain feelings and emotions and vibes and even trigger thoughts just from manipulating sound waves and how they affect you physically and emotionally. So there's like definitely scope with that. But then could it be a case of where if people just like consume things so much, so quickly, they're gonna get desensitized and it's just gonna be like, okay, whatever. Like maybe the attention will shift on from, okay, we've conquered making images now. I'm sure it's gonna be the music's the same way now. Like you can literally, I'm sure you've seen it where you can mimic an artist's voice and put it over a beat or vice versa. To eventually motion, which I think is happening now. It'll make in 3D. It'll make everything. It'll go for the whole thing and all sorts. So it does feel to me a bit like a swarm of hornets or something. When they pass through, like just annihilate vegetation and then move on and then they die and then start again the next year. It does give me that kind of vibe. But like, what would you like to see from AI or that technology? What would you like to see from it? Because there are, in terms of, I guess you could say, positives in the sense of how quickly it can calculate, how it can add another dimension to maybe things or introduce people even to things or skills where they never had any skills. So like, is there anything that you would like to say, like if you were given the keys to AI or the Infinity Stones to AI and you had the gauntlet, what would you create or destroy with AI in your hands?
Like from a designer perspective or like visual designer perspective,
everything.
Not I can see like animating stuff or something would be cool, but like my primary thing is for game development. I have like with two friends we co-founded a company and we're making this game ABRISS, and we are game devs and we know how to code, but it's not we're not like super crazy experts at it, and we are much more like game designers, and we want to get down the gameplay, the mechanics, and we don't want to bother too much with the technical implementations, like making everything run smooth or implementing multiplayer or something crazy like that, or just optimizing, or like I would love an AI to just reduce the game development process to the design stuff, like this high level concepts and putting everything together. Like for example, you're designing some sort of roguelike or something, and you can just write with prompts like how this base system is supposed to work, and an integration with a game engine would be super cool. At the moment, it's just very good at scripting, but it's on the other hand, it replaced some sort of normal search algorithm, so I don't have to type in how do you do this, and or I forgot like a certain kind of syntax or something, so I can just type that in and it will give me a script or an efficient solution for like a math problem or something, for like, or come up with an algorithm I could never think of because I'm like not that deep into it. So that's already very useful, but it's very isolated from the project. So like a holistic integration with the project would be super powerful. Just because it's for me, game development is also about iterations and finding like the design ideas, and bothering too much with optimization and such things is not what I'm into game design wise. Even though it's making games is fun, and right now it's you have to do it in order to get your prototype together or whatever. So I'd like to see that, yeah.
So yeah, like almost to spec, right? Like you need a specific thing doing, and it will just keep you focused on the things you want to focus on, right? Like as opposed to the other little annoying things you kind of have to do. But yeah, like the game project, I'd love to hear more about that. Like I mentioned to you before we started the podcast, obviously I was familiar with your work, but I truly got to know you a little bit better during your presentation at GFD North. Shout out to Ryan for setting that up last year. And again, like just seeing how you broke down your project, and which has surprised me that you mentioned that so I got to call you out a little bit, because you said you're a brute force kind of guy, but the way you showed, I think it was a Miro board. I still remember how you showed that with the project, of that you showed the presentation of how you broke that down. That to me looked very organized compared to how I described brute force. So maybe you got some organization skills there. I don't know, but I believe you mentioned at that point as well that you were making a game, or actively making a game. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, and how did that journey even begin?
So yeah, I studied game design in Berlin. In fact, I'm still have to write my master's degree. I should do that right now. Not dragging it out for too long, but with two friends, Friedrich and Johannes, we co-founded a game studio, and that's something that is very encouraged by our university, HTW Berlin, and they really want to. They support us a lot with like incubation spaces, with rooms, with all technical equipment that we need, and also with consultations and whatever. And then there's also like a government like funding of projects. That's also very convenient. So based on that, we took one of our projects from university and made a game out of it, and it's called ABRISS, and we've had it out in early access for like a year now, and now the full release it's about to drop, and we got some collaborations going on. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to announce anything specific right now, but yeah, that's like our first project, and that's pretty much done now, and now we have the chance to move on to the next project, and I'm really excited about it. And that's also what takes up most of my time. So for the next phase, we will come up with a prototype for a new game, like in the next 4 months or something, and then hopefully we have something good and can make a game out of it. And it's very
sick. How do you feel about that journey? Like, is it something that you can see after obviously embarking on it now? I'm sure a lot of it was fueled by the necessities of the course as well, as opposed to just purely wanting to do that. But is this something that you can see? Because I'm sure it's a lot of work and a lot of dedication required as well to even do that. Like, is this something that you want to do almost, I guess you could say, for the rest of your career, even your life, perhaps? Is this kind of like your medium of expression that you want to, I guess, dive into? Or do you have other things happening?
So games, you mean, yeah?
Yeah.
So making your own game is it's so interactive, and it has all those aspects. So it's a good way to express yourself. And if you don't have the constraints of something, like an indie game studio is fairly independent in most of the cases, unless your publisher says you need to do this and that. But so we haven't had this experience yet. So we were just free to do whatever we want, which is really cool. And it's a great way to express yourself. And making prototypes is really fun, but game development, like, it has like this idea phase in the beginning, and it's like, yeah, that would be super cool, and then we implement this and this feature, and all this fun stuff is at the beginning, and you have a very high change rate, so stuff changes quickly, and you implement a new feature, and it feels like, wow, we're getting somewhere. And the further you progress, the more or the less you see the progress you're making, and every single step is just a tiny bit more, and it gets frustrating. And then you encounter all these technical issues, and then you have to you're creating something that someone else has to interact with, that someone else has to understand. So you need to design a tutorial, and you need to implement all this stuff that is necessary, like leaderboards and menus and key rebinding. And so yeah, luckily we are three developers, so we get to each of us has to do some of the shitty work. Yeah, I think games are a great way. We as a studio need to find a way to just push out more games and get better at making games, because this was our first game, and we can see all the flaws, and it's very far from perfect. And that's making games is like super hard, and I have like the greatest of respect for people who actually make a smooth game that people understand, that it's just that you can put 40 plus hours into it. It's insane, especially like solo devs or indie devs. So those guys are great designers on multiple levels. They know, like, they're great artists maybe, and also great technical artists, and great developers, and great communicators, and great organizers. And and that's something we want to get good at as well. And I think all this in the game projects, I'm not doing that much art stuff. Like, everything has to be like understandable. It's all about design, of course, but it's not necessarily art. So I use this concept art stuff to do my art stuff and all my personal projects to express this side of things. Yeah.
And do you find that, like, it's important to have those different outlets? Like, does it help you, I guess, keep you sane? Or does it make you more insane, perhaps?
Doing both at the same time is not good. Like, it's good to have those outlets, as well as like doing something physical like sport, or playing some sort of music. So that's also really nice, and getting just relaxation, just like times of rest. So yeah. But it's very different for me to do personal work and client work. It's a totally different feeling, and it's also a very different feeling to work on the game, because it's our own project. It's our own, like, every single thing that I put into this project is for our team, and we will benefit from it directly. And we're not this is a totally different relation compared to just a job that you get hired for. Of course, I'm always trying to make everything as good as possible and to come up with like really cool results. So that's I think that's clear. But doing like client work and my own work at the same time is just too stressful. That's not. I tried it out for like a few months, but I then noticed that I need some time for myself to relax and I don't, like, maybe there are some people out there who can work like on high intensity for a long period of time, but I'm not one of those people. I'm getting how do you say it, burned out, or like I need some time to relax and then gather my energies. So that's something that works like for 1 or 2 months for me, like pulling 50-hour weeks or something, and then everything collapses and I get like I end up at zero or maybe even minus or something. I don't know.
That's
I
actually
don't know
quite
how it is for you. Yeah.
oh no, very much the same. And I learned the hard way, and ashamedly I learned out what the true definition of burnout was until after it happened to me many times. Like I didn't even give that a label, like that effect of burnout. I was like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not able to perform, like there's something that I did wrong, when in fact I ran out of battery, I ran out of juice. But speaking of games, like that does sound like a good gameplay mechanic, or a game, maybe, like, burnout, like not the car game from EA back in the day, but like managing 50-hour weeks and then not burning out. And it is, I guess you could say, kind of like a game as well, like knowing where to put your energy, when to back off, when to be smart about it. I've definitely gotten better over the last few years, but there are modes where I'm just like, I find I'm back into that little, habit. And a few months ago, even, it was just a case of like, I was thinking, what the hell am I even doing? Like, this is just, this is insane. Again, I gained a lot more weight than I actually wanted to. I'm not the lightest of guys, but I definitely gained a few more pounds during that period. A lot of it was just from that as well. So I recognize those kind of things, at least in the physical sense, are because of that. So it's kind of like, trying to figure that out as well. For yourself, even, like, how do you tend to keep yourself, and you touched upon it a little bit there as well, keep yourself from burning out? And even when you do burn out, what process do you go through? Like, how does it affect you when you burn out, and what does it stop you from doing? Because at least for me, sometimes when I'm burnt out, it just feels like, you just can't move, almost, like, at least mentally, because you're just so exhausted, and you have to wait until that health meter refills, and then I can go again. But yeah, I'd love to know your experiences and how you battle it and overcome it as well.
So I had like only two phases where it got really intense, and where I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like I can take on like this double this double stress. And luckily, like I never had a client that I worked like for years or something. So that's not something I had to do for a sustained amount of time. But at like the end of this work periods, I was like generally more stressed. Like I woke up and I thought like I need to do this now, and there was no time for for other stuff, and no time to go out and just enjoy a walk in a park or something. And the brain's always occupied with these problems that I need to solve, and it's just and it leads to like worse resting, and like everything gets worse in general. And also like I don't feel then that inspired, and I don't get like the best ideas, and something just like yes, something will just get worse, and like it might work for me. It works like for 2 weeks or something, and then it gets a little bit too intense. Yeah, but luckily now I have this time of just laying back more or less. There are just a few things that I need to do, and that's really cool to have. And I'm now and really enjoying it. And after seeing what I'm like, I'm more relaxed. I have more humor. I can.
Yeah.
It's everything is just better for me. And I try to find a mode for me where there's always enough time for this. So something balanced, and I'm also trying to figure out how to organize this for myself, and handling all the stuff. But yeah, for this year I also turned down a lot of offers for like gigs, even though they're really cool people, and with some of them I already work together, and they're really nice, and but I just can't I can't manage all of this. And yeah, but that's maybe also something when you get freshly into it, and you get those jobs, and you try to cover all of them in some way. And maybe that's something that I needed to learn.
Yeah, I think that kind of answers my next question. Like, do you think you needed that, so to speak. Like obviously not like, to burn out, like as you explained, it's not good, it's not nice, and it's not nice when you kind of recognize it as well, because you kind of realize that, oh man, that, I kind of like, you're only responsible, right? Like the individual responsible almost, so to speak, for the burnout. Like burnout is an act that no one can force you to do, if that makes any sense. That's my opinion, because although yes, it's sometimes work related and sometimes tasks you do, it's obviously we have different reasons why we do them, but it's something that we initially engaged in and agreed to engage in, and then we go ahead with it. But for yourself, like looking back at it now, do you think that experience is going to prove to be invaluable for you?
Yeah, I don't know how to learn the stuff, and like people will tell you, but I think everything is exciting. Like getting into it for me was exciting, and also like whenever you work with a new client, you're not sure. Like some of the jobs are like you feel free, and whenever I enjoy stuff, I won't, or when I have the freedom and like the enough space, it's unlikely to burn or to burn a lot of energy while doing it. And it's also the same for personal projects that can get stressful if you want to finish them or something. But for most of the time, it is not something that consumes the energy, because it's more something that you wake up in the morning for and you can't wait to get to it, and you want to get it. Like this is like the best state. But yeah, whenever you get a new client, you can't tell how stressful it will be. And I mean, stressful, like there's always it's very, very different experiences I had so far, also in terms of communication and everything. So you're probably also familiar with all of this stuff, but it's a very different. And maybe it's also about picking clients that you are familiar with to minimize stress and to keep like processes that are already established alive, and make everything easier, and don't stress out if something doesn't work and you have no submission or something. Or I also, so like when you're new, you want to prove that you're not not a shitty pig, like so, or for me at least, yeah. But that lowers like the better I get to know the client. Yeah.
And in terms of like obviously the time you've had off now, which I think is, I'll commend you for it, because it's, at the same time you could have easily gone the route of like, okay, well, I'll still keep taking the offers and still repeat that same process. And I'm sure if you did it all over again, because you've done it already, like using the game term again, you're replaying the same game again, you know where all the hacks are, how to defeat the boss this time in a much more efficient way, I'm sure it'll be more smoother next time. But taking those breaks, like it's priceless, I'd say. And you're doing it right now. What are you enjoying the most about not doing the other things? Like, are there any specific hobbies or activities you're doing that are really like almost, I guess, in a mindful way, in a mental health kind of way, and even just like just a general make you kind of happy kind of way? What other things are you doing outside of making cool designs and games?
Yeah, so I spend time outside. I'm going for a walk with my girlfriend and with friends. I'm meeting people, like doing activities with my girlfriend, all kinds of stuff. And then I'm also sport-wise, I'm very cliche Berlin person, and I'm going bouldering like everyone else in the city. It's like completely, there are always hundreds of people in this bouldering gyms, but I still go there, and it's a lot of fun. It's also very playful, and I completely don't try hard at bouldering, because it really doesn't matter for me like how hard the route is. It will always be a challenge, like no matter like what degree. And the same is like last year I used to skate a lot, skateboarding, and the same approach. Like I'm not very good at it, but I don't care as long as it's fun. And the same I'm doing like with drums. I'm not really try-harding, and just it's nothing I have to um, yeah, I'm not actively trying to get better. If there's something that I want to get to because I think it's very fun, I'm trying it and repeating it, and then like this playful way is something that works for me, and that's also something that works for me when coming up with game prototypes, and that's also something that works for me when doing art. And most of my personal projects are just playing around and filling around with very little constraints, and whenever it gets serious, I start to lose this joyfulness. So there are like two modes of everything for me. And it's also, I think it's very difficult, especially as an artist, because when you notice that something works, you're thinking of, yeah, and then I could turn this into this, and maybe a commercial use, or maybe something that you can reap the benefits from. And I think that's very something that also came with social media or something. And because everyone tries to sell everything, and I'm kind of sick of it. And I'm part of the problem, of course, but like I'm showing my work on multiple platforms and stuff, and that's also something that just stresses me out. And I'm really just generating with whatever you make, generating some sort of attention, and I don't mind if it's something that's really worth showing. And yeah, but that's certainly something I think about, and that also affects me. And that and when it affects me, I don't feel good. I feel like I have to isolate everything and not show anything. But on the other hand, it's also very fun to show stuff. And I want to see the awesome stuff by all the other people. So if all the great artists and people I look at would stop sharing their stuff because they don't need to, or they feel like they're done with whatever, that would be a great loss, of course. But yeah, it's always tricky.
Yeah. Social media is a very interesting thing, and we mentioned before about AI. And when I think of AI and how it affects us, I immediately think of social media and how that has affected us. And I mean by us, like his humanity in general. Like it's weird. I remember I'm an old dude. I'm like turning 37 soon. So I remember when like internet first came along, and it was not like how it is now. Like what we're doing now was not be possible back then. A very analog internet was back then. Like a lot of cables needed, a lot of stuff. But seeing how it's progressed today, and seeing how like social media when it came along, and how people were connecting, and all it was kind of like a slight mutation of what people were doing before. Like when it was how people used to communicate from before, it's just compress that, like, you know, like in music term, like when you compress sound, like it brings a lot of the frequencies together to give it more presence. It's kind of did that with communication, but it kind of mutated it as well. It kind of skewed what communication actually means and what people gain from it. And then add to that, not to get all like super philosophical and weird, but add to that how the human brain works, and when you're developing, and then seeing that how it's changed over time. So I kind of saw it from the beginning. So I've always kind of kept it at arm's length. And I still will. I always will, because I just it's not for me.
That's good. Yeah,
I kind of see it like radiation. Like I kind of go into always like the hazmat suit on with a Geiger counter and making sure I don't get too much exposure. Because it's not for me.
That's smart. Yeah,
but equally, with that said, what you mentioned, I still go through those same processes, because there's always that hit you get when you post something, it's appreciated. And then when you see who's appreciating it, oh, those are my peers. They love it too. That's even better. It's short-lived, but it still affects my brain. Like I can't turn that mechanism off in my brain that gives me that hit when you do the act of like posting something, for example. And what you just mentioned there as well is something that I'm definitely doing right now, where I'm intentionally not posting stuff and let those things gestate. And when they're ready, I'll put them out, but they're not purely almost happy that no one's kind of seeing them. That makes sense. Like I'll wait till it's ready and that's that. But in the past, like I did every days and I was putting stuff out there just because I thought, hey, that's what you do. And it became almost like, back to gaming terms, like a game. Like, can I do it today? I did it. Oh, cool. Well, this one's working. That one no one liked. That one liked more. And it's cool, but I guess it depends on what your bigger picture is, what your goals are. What do you want from it? Equally, I'm sure people out there would argue that posting stuff and putting it out there is a positive thing for them versus what they weren't doing before. But yeah, like your relationship with social media, like has it always have you just come to that epiphany what you just mentioned before, like right now, or is it always kind of like wavered? And what do you think about social media, especially for a creative? Like, because obviously equally it's like a double-edged sword, like it gives you opportunities. I'm sure you've gotten work from stuff you've posted online versus it definitely impacts how and maybe why you create as well. So yeah, I'd love to get your take on social media impact to a creative, especially yourself.
Let me think about that. So I started on posting stuff on ArtStation with like just for fun, more or less, and some of this stuff got traction, and I thought like, okay, this is not super shitty what I'm doing, and then I continued, and it is a huge motivation boost on the one hand, and it's also, I think I certainly need some sort of feedback for what I'm doing. So I'm not like living from thin air and just because I'm so passionate about it. I think like for me at least, there needs to be some feedback, and I also want to know when it's not good. And so I need this kind of level, but it can get addictive, and it certainly can get addictive, and it also, when it comes to like maximizing, like tailoring work to be like effective for like social media purposes. I mean, for games, that's certainly something worth thinking about, because you want to sell this stuff, but for personal work, it becomes very obscure. And so what I'm at least trying to do is not let that influence too much. Like I'm creating art because that's the purpose of it. Like it's not. I'm not doing art to get something. It's just I want to look at it as at a self purpose, and whatever it slips away from me, and I'm thinking like, yeah, I could post this there, and I could adjust it a little bit, and maybe putting on some flashy details and whatever, or colors, or just so it pops more or something. These are thoughts that are very far away from this zone of just making it for the joy itself. So it's like a self cause. But it's for me, it's kind of hard to manage this balance and not doing it to get something else. And I can certainly like everyone has reasons, and it's also important to put work out. Like for me, I get all my gigs from like ArtStation. I think it's probably 90% of the requests that I got from ArtStation. And so that's also, if you need the money and you need to work, and so that's really important. That's like an economic thing, and that's also something I think worth separating from all the other stuff, and really like taking this role, and maybe in the morning putting on like the business head or whatever, and really looking at it from this perspective, and just using it as a tool, and just as a business thing, and looking at it, and from this perspective, it makes sense to create a lot of traction, and it will also help to negotiate better rates if you have like more followers and stuff, maybe, and more experience or whatever. I don't know. I'm not an expert at this, but I get that counts into the bigger picture. But I think it's, for me at least, it's also important to take this head off at some point, and then going back to the core of it. And but I'm also not like I shouldn't give any business tips or whatever, because I really suck at it, and I'm also not in a process of like accumulating a lot of money or something. Like I don't have like this thing in my life that I really need, and I work to this. Why I'm not like maximizing on all of this stuff, but maybe that comes at some points. I don't.
No, I think you definitely made some good points there, and it's kind of like what you mentioned there about like, as a game developer as well, like there's certain tasks and certain aspects that you don't necessarily enjoy, maybe don't even want to do, but you have to do them, otherwise it's not going to get made. And I think social media, at least as a creative, it's kind of like the same, like it's unavoidable. Obviously, I'm sure there's other ways, but it's a very efficient way because it gets a lot of eyeballs, especially important eyeballs that do want to hire people and do want to, you know, give you money for your craft. Like it's something that it's worth cultivating. But at the same time, you know, it's like you said, like if you wear it as like you put your hat on and treat it that way, especially for those that are like, you know, have a love-hate relationship with social media, or maybe even an unhealthy relationship where it does really get to them, then maybe that's a cool way to look at it. Like look at it as a job, almost as a chore that you have to do, as opposed to something that's, I guess, like giving it more meaning than it's worth, so to speak. But then equally, like I said, someone could say the complete opposite. And also, because so many people use it now, I guess every single scenario is true. Like some people are happier with it, some people are happier without it, and everything in between. Back to your game, for example. One question I forgot to ask you is, you mentioned there like there's certain aspects you don't like, but which aspects do you like from making the game? Or is it just more so like just knowing that you got this vision and you want to bring it to life?
So there's one thing I want to add, like to the last point first. Sure, I actually know, like thinking about it, I know a lot of artists don't have like some extremely good artists who don't have a big social media presence, but they had more like the initiative of like picking the place they want to go, and they went there and they just showed their portfolio and they were like, okay, so it's not posting all of this stuff requires you to go out into the world and ask people for it, and that's also a great skill, I think, that I don't really have. But posting this stuff will maybe get you opportunities that you did not think of before, like some weird stuff that you never heard of, but that's really cool to work on or something. So that's, but I don't think it's like a different mode of operation, I think, But for the game, like the fun part is the prototyping, and you have this great idea, like typically, the last game that I played that I really got stuck on, I want to create something similar like it. And I think that's the same for every game dev. So the three of us are playing certain games, and then we're like, look at this, and this is so awesome. And then coming up with something very similar in the first phase, but coming up with a cool prototype, with a original approach, maybe with a cool setting, and then putting together like the first pieces and watch everything come to life. It's very cool, and I especially like systems that have their own dynamic and that really come to life and that have a lot of interactions. So it's really cool to see, and the stressful part is just finishing it and cleaning everything up and making it a good experience. Like it's much more difficult to like this whole user experience, and also feedback, designing good feedback, understandable feedback, something that's really satisfying and intuitive. And this is like completely different from just doing concept art. So it's much more. You need to think of a lot more stuff. But on the other hand, like in concept art, I get to work on very specific things, and I would never ever in my life use one of my vehicle concepts and put it into an indie game. That would eat up like half of our production time for me to model this thing and make a low poly or something, and it's like totally unusable. But in like concept art, I get to do these very specific things, like a skin for a gun or something. A gun that already has like 50 skins or something, some very specific stuff. And it's cool that some of the bigger studios have like money to hire people to do something very specific, and that's a luxury that you don't have in indie games. So, for example, for our next game, we're really thinking about how to get more bang for our time in terms of basic systems. So now we created a game where we had to handcraft every single level using some sort of kit bash library, of course, or some sort of prefabs, presets. But still, we had to create like 50 or 70 levels crafted by hand, and we're thinking about how to optimize processes, how to reuse stuff, and we really need to keep an eye on it and keep everything efficient and not coming up with like weird features, and it would never occur or it would never come to our mind to create a legendary skin for some sort of, I don't know. That's just a luxury that you don't have as an indie game developer, I think. Unless you're doing like a toy, or you're maybe some sort of wizard tech artist, and you're just creating this castle building toy or whatever, then you can dive very deep into it. Or your game narrows down to just one specific thing. But I guess for our upcoming games, we try to keep it small, keep it simple, but scope management is like one of the most difficult things for us. And I think we will come up with something that's too big for us to handle, and then still try to make it work. But yeah.
Wow, amazing. I'm sure like even those challenges that you're having and getting, it's shaping you and all of you in a way where it's like only going to make you guys way more efficient, way more better in the future as well. Do you guys have like a deadline or like a potential release for when the game is going to be completed? Is that like somewhere that's feasible right now? And I guess maybe it's a naive question, like when you develop a game, should you always have that in mind, or does that come later on down the line?
Yes, so for this game, it's pretty much done. So we just need to coordinate stuff with our publisher. So we're working with a publisher right now, and it's in their hands, and we're really happy about this collaboration. Like it's not like the normal way where you would pitch your prototype or whatever, come up with something very small and get financiation, or no, like how do you call this? Get the funds for the entire project, and then at the end you are sitting there and the publisher will need to recuperate all of this stuff, and then you're seeing money at some point. So we are doing this at the very end with them, which so this process gave us a whole creative freedom over the project, and now we are happy to work with them to get it out in the world, to the people a little bit more, and they know their stuff better. They have they're very good at what they're doing, so we're happy to work with them. And so for our next game, it's kind of hard. So there's one prototype at the moment that we want to do. There's like a more specific vision for it, but like in most of the time, the stuff in your head doesn't turn out the way, or the game idea that you're having doesn't turn out like it is in your head, and there's a lot of testing involved. So we'll be optimizing our processes and getting like the shittiest small version of the game out there and testing it with people, and really seeing early on how they receive it and what they're doing with it, and really keeping it simple. And like one of my weaknesses is I sometimes just dive into a feature that will be deleted, like cause working on something that isn't even necessary is like one of my special skills. So that's something to avoid, like really testing it, and also in the most efficient way. Like sometimes you don't have to build like the game in the engine, like we're using Unity. Sometimes you can just test it with cards or with some sort of card simulator or something, and that's really enough to verify a concept or to ditch it. And then having milestones and for me personally, it's not about it's about avoiding deep dives into unnecessary stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's really fun to see people develop games, because like in an artwork you can see the personality of the person, or like how they look at the world and what they focus on what is important to them. And for games, it's even more interesting because it really reflects on all layers, especially when people work alone on a game. You can see it on every single layer, like in the game subject, like how the gameplay is executed, what's like the sound, the feedback and everything. And that's just super cool to see different people approaching a game, maybe even the same game idea in so many different ways. It's it's really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, but scope management is like the most difficult thing, and the three of us we have to learn a lot. Like we did so many mistakes with our first game. It's yeah, we have a list somewhere written down with all the bullshit that we did. Yeah.
See, that's so fascinating. I was really excited to see that come to life and even get to play it as well. I guess because you mentioned one game that maybe kind of might give the game that you're making away, so maybe not mention that one. But like, what kind of games inspire you, or like, are your go-to? Like, okay, that's like, I love that game. That's what made me want to do. Because I'm assuming that like it was gaming in general, and the culture of gaming, and just games, the game universe itself, that made you want to make a game, right? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I don't really know why. Like the games is like a super cool way to. So when I was signed up for this university, I wasn't really aware of what making a game actually looks like, and I never made like a game in engine. Like some of the people who applied for university, they already made a bunch of games and stuff, and they knew it. And it's kind of a cool coincidence that it suits me relatively well to do this kind of stuff, or at least it's fun for me. So that's kind of cool. And the games that inspire me the most, like apart from like multiplayer games with friends, I really like recently like roguelikes and card-based deck builders. So Slay the Spire I played, and Monster Train I tried recently. And apart from that, I just poured a ton of time into some sort of multiplayer games, and also way too much time into League of Legends. So, but I will never touch that again. So, what else? Civ 6 and 5, and yeah, some sort of multiplayer shooters. Like, yeah.
Civ, you meant like Civilization?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's also like
that game,
a few hundred hours.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Too many hours, but so addictive that game is.
Yeah.
So good. They haven't made a new one for a while, have they? I think they've stopped it on like, I think 5 or 6 or something.
6, yeah. I don't, that might, yeah, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. I don't know. Time for a new one.
Definitely. Till we've reached a lot of the time. It's been amazing chatting with you and connecting with you. Before we go, any final thoughts, words from yourself to the listeners, where people can find you, and anything that you'd like to plug or share? Let everybody know.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me. It was it was a fun talk. Like the time went by like really fast. Yeah, something I want to plug. ABRISS, Build to Destroy is the name of our game, and yeah, it's worth picking up, and recommended by the developer. So like, yeah, no. And what else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. No final thoughts.
Cool. No worries. All the links to Till stuff is in the description. Please link that. Click on that link. And Till, thanks for chatting with me. We should do this again sometime.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Simply epic from Till. And be sure to hit the links to see what Till is up to and check out game-changing courses for your own creative journeys. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.